Well, children, the topic for today's discussion is lesson number 7, packing. This lesson is an extract from a famous book, Three Men in a Boat. That book was written by Jerome K Jerome. He was a famous English author and he has written a travelogue. It is a comic travelogue. It is full of humor, and the title is Three Men in a Boat. This uh, lesson, packing, is an extract from that book, and in this extract also you will find there is element of humor present everywhere. It makes you laugh and it gives you a very light, enjoyable reading. And the topic of this lesson is packing. That is the only theme, packing. How three children perform the act of packing. That is the topic. And humor is involved by the author in that. Well, the three children are, one is the narrator or the author himself, Jerome K Jerome, and the other one is George, and the third one is Harris. These three children are there. Three characters are there in this story. It's a travelogue. I told you, travelogue means the account of a travel. So when you go on a trip or you have to make a long journey, suppose you have to make a long journey tomorrow, I have to go on a trip tomorrow, you you will have to pack certain articles, certain things which you would require during your journey or during your trip. Okay, and when you do packing, sometimes you suddenly realize that you have forgotten to pack some important thing. So when it happens, are you angry with yourself or you laugh at yourself? That is the question, isn't it? So when such things happen in the story, whether these children are angry with themselves or they laugh at themselves and create a funny situation, that we will see when we discuss this story. Okay, now let us begin the first paragraph. It is here on the screen, you can see. I said I would pack. I means the narrator, Jerome. He said I would pack. I rather pride myself on my packing. Packing is one of those many things that I feel I know more about than any other person living. It surprises me myself sometimes how many such things there are. That means the narrator is very much proud of himself. He says he thinks that he is the best packer in this world. Okay, and at the same time he thinks there are so many things which he can do comfortably well. Okay, I impressed the fact upon George and Harris. Two other boys are there in the story. He tells that he would do packing, he would pack, and told them that they had better leave the whole matter entirely to me. They fell into the suggestion with a readiness that had something uncanny about it. Uncanny means very strange and weird. They gave a suggestion, and in that suggestion there was something very strange, something very uncommon, something very weird. Okay, George spread himself over the easy chair and Harris cocked his legs on the table. Cocked his legs. Cocked means he bent his legs on the table. So they sat, they relaxed, and they let the narrator do the work of packing. Okay, then what happens next paragraph? You see, this was hardly what I intended. What I had meant, of course, was that I should boss the job and that Harris and George should potter about under my directions. I pushing them aside every now and then with, "Oh, you, here, let me do it." The narrator says that actually he wanted to become a boss. He wanted two other boys to engage in the job of packing, and he would instruct them how to pack, what to pack, what not to pack. He should potter about means do some unimportant things. Okay, George should potter about under my directions. That means he should obey the narrator's direction in the process of packing. This is what he had meant actually. Okay, well then, there you are, simple enough. That means all these things, when they George and Harris, they work under his supervision, he would be giving them instructions. He would be saying, "Oh, you, here, let me do it, here, there you are," simple enough. All such comments he would make while those two boys would do the packing work. But what he had expected has not happened. They just relaxed. See, George relaxed on an easy chair, and Harris relaxed on a table, and they let the narrator do the work. And this is what irritated the narrator. And the narrator says, I would have liked to give them instructions, really teaching them, as you might say. They're taking it in the way they did irritated me. In what way they did it? They just relaxed, and they thought that the narrator would do the entire picking. There is nothing does irritate me more than seeing other people sitting about doing nothing when I am working. The narrator feels or thinks that when he works, the others also should work, or rather, others should work under his direction, his supervision. Then he narrates the story. Once what happened, he says, the previous story he narrates, "I lived with a man once who used to make me mad that way. He would loll on the sofa." Loll means relax. Loll means relax. He would loll on the sofa and watch me doing things by the hour together. He said it did him real good to look on at me messing about. That means while packing, I make a mess of thing. Sometimes I forget something, then I get confused. All this mess gave him pleasure to that man about whom the narrator is talking in this paragraph. Now, I am not like that. I can't sit still and see another man slaving and working. I want to get up and superintend and walk around with my hands in my pockets and tell him what to do. It's my energetic nature. I can't help it. He says that I don't want to see anybody working like a slaving and working just like a slave. If one works, he doesn't like. He says what he says in a humorous tone. The author has narrated in this paragraph that he would like, when the other fellow is working, he would like to supervise his work. He would superintend or supervise his work and give him instructions. And the man about whom he has talked in this paragraph irritated him, because that man also was so lazy and idle that he just sat and make the narrator do all the work. Well, then the next paragraph. Now, about these boys who are just relaxing while he's packing, he comes to these two boys. He says, he talks about them now here in this paragraph. However, I did not say anything, but started the packing. It seemed a longer job than I had thought it was going to be, but I got the bag finished at last, and I sat on it and strapped it. So in bag, he has to put the articles and pack them properly, and he has to strap the bag. He did it then. Then as soon as he finished packing and he strapped his bag, a comment comes from his friend Harris. He says, "Aren't you," that means aren't you, "aren't you" means are you not, or aren't you going to put the boots in, said Harris. And I looked round and round. I had forgotten them. That means the narrator says he had forgotten to pack his boots. That's just like Harris. He couldn't have said a word until I had got the bag shut and strapped. Of course. He says, Harris goes on watching me, and he knows that I have not packed the boot. But when I finish the packing, at that time only he would make a point to bring in my knowledge that I had forgotten to pack the boots. Just to irritate me, he behaves like that. This is what the author says. Author means here, you see. And George laughed, one of those irritating, senseless laughs of his. They do make me so wild, so angry. When Harris and George both mocked him, they laughed at him, saying that he had forgotten to pack the boots. Their laughter made him angry. He felt so wild, he says. So irritated, he says. Okay, then paragraph number 5. The narrator further says, I opened the bag and packed the boots in. And then, just as I was going to close it, a horrible idea occurred to me. Had I packed my toothbrush? Picking the toothbrush is really a very, very trying or very trouble-giving matter for the author, it seems. So that's why he has devoted 1 or 2 following paragraphs on packing the toothbrush. I don't know how it is, but I never do know whether I have packed my toothbrush. The toothbrush is something which he always forgets while doing the packing work. This is what the narrator means, he says. Now, sorry. In the following paragraph, he has talked about the toothbrush, how he forgets it, you see. My toothbrush is a thing that haunts me. That haunts me means here troubles me. That haunts me means troubles me when I am traveling, and makes my life a misery. Misery means life miserable means unhappy, isn't it? Sad, unhappy or sad, sorrowful. The word has been used here in a comic vein, isn't it? Not really in the true sense. I dream that I haven't packed it and wake up in a cold perspiration and get out of bed and hunt for it. Hunt for it means for the toothbrush. It happens with me. It always happens with me. This is what the narrator says in regard with packing the toothbrush. And in the morning I pack it before I have used it, and have to unpack again to get it, and it is always the last thing I turn out of the bag, and then I repack and forget it. Repack means repack the bag. He says the last thing that I remove from the bag is the toothbrush, and he just forgets it. He repacks the bag, and he thinks that he has put the toothbrush in his bag. He repacks the bag and he forgets about the toothbrush, and have to rush upstairs for it at the last moment and carry it to the railway station wrapped up in my pocket handkerchief. Then at the last moment he remembers that the toothbrush is upstairs. He runs, he gets it, and finally, as the bag is already packed, he packs or wraps the toothbrush in a pocket handkerchief and carries it with him. This is what happens with the narrator, he says. Well, then he says, of course, I had to turn every mortal thing out now, and of course I could not find it. Now he's searching the toothbrush. The idea had struck to him that he had forgotten to pack it, and he couldn't find it, where the toothbrush is, whether it is packed or not. I rummaged the things. Rummaged means searched in a hurried and careless manner. I rummaged the things up into much the same state that they must have been before the world was created. That means all things he upset while searching the toothbrush. And when chaos reigned, he just compares this situation with the situation when the world was being created and there was very chaotic situation. Chaos means confusion, isn't it? In the same way here, in regard with packing the toothbrush, the chaotic situation or the chaos have been created. The situation is very chaotic, confusing, whether he has packed the toothbrush or not. He is searching it and he is unable to find it. Of course, I found George's and Harris's 18 times over. Their toothbrushes he found, but I couldn't find my own. I put the things back one by one and held everything up and shook it. Then I found it inside a boot. I repacked once more. He finds the toothbrush inside a boot. He gets it and he repacks the bag once more. Okay, when he has repacked the bag, then what happens? When I had finished, George asked if the soap was in, whether he had packed the soap or not. I said I didn't care a hang. Didn't care a hang means I show no concern or no interest. I didn't care a hang means I don't show any care or interest whether the soap was in or whether it was not. It wasn't. Whether I had packed the soap or I hadn't packed the soap. About that he said I didn't care a hang. That means I didn't care at all. He told George. Okay, and I slammed the bag shut and strapped it and found that I had packed my spectacles in and had to reopen it. I got shut up finally at 10:05 p.m. in the night. He had forgotten his spectacles. Then again he opens, and then again he removes the spectacles from the bag, and finally the packing is done at 5 minutes past 10 o'clock in the night. 10:05 p.m. And then there remained the hampers to do. Hampers means these baskets. You carry the food and other articles when you go on a trip or a journey. Okay, so the hampers were to be packed now. Now these hampers or the baskets are to be packed by Harris and George. Here Jerome has completed his part of packing, and now the remaining two boys, Harris and George, would do the remaining packing. Okay, Harris said that we should be wanting to start in less than 12 hours time. That is, in the morning they had to leave. They had to leave in the morning. Okay, for their trip, and thought that he and George had better do the rest. Better do the rest means the rest of the packing he and George would do, he suggested. Harris suggested. Okay, Harris suggested, and I agreed and sat down, and they had to go. They had to go means they had to start the work of packing. Well, then the next paragraph, paragraph number 8. They began in a light-hearted spirit, in a very lighter vein, in a very light mood. They started the work of packing. Okay, evidently means obviously, intending to show me how to do it. They wanted to show off themselves. They wanted to impress on the narrator that this is how the packing is done. I made no comment. I only waited. He waited for the boys to commit mistakes while packing, and then he would comment. He might have thought in his mind. With the exception of George, Harris is the worst packer in this world. In the narrator's opinion, Harris is the worst packer. George is better than Harris, but George also is not as perfect as anybody. Okay, and I looked at the piles of plates and cups. Now in this paragraph, the narrator is telling you, Jerome is telling you, while packing, what a mess George and Harris made. What a mess of things they made while packing. What they did, they did, as I looked at the piles of plates and cups and kettles and bottles and jars and pies. Actually, pie is the some edible that is stuffed. For example, this samosa is a pie. Kachori also is a pie. It is the stuffed edible thing. So pies and stoves and cakes and tomatoes, etc. All these things were lying on the floor or on the table. They were scattered in the room, while these two boys, Harris and George, were doing the packing work, and felt that the thing would soon become exciting. He wanted to have a fun with them. He wanted to make fun of them, and that's why he thinks that when Harris and George do packing, the things would be exciting, and I would just catch them doing any wrong or any mistake as regards the packing. It did. It happened. What happened? They started with breaking a cup. That was the first thing they did. They did that just to show you what they could do and to get you interested. Deliberately, knowingly, they broke a cup to attract the narrator's attention. The narrator feels. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of a tomato and squeezed it. Strawberry jam's bottle was heavy. He placed it in the hamper on a tomato, and tomato was squeezed. It was broken. It was burst, and they had to pick out the tomato with a teaspoon. The tomato juice or the tomato juice they had to take out from the hamper with the help of a teaspoon. And then it was George's turn. Now Harry made such mistakes, this what we have seen in the previous paragraph, and then the narrator says now the George would do the remaining part of packing, and he trod on the butter. He stepped on the butter. I didn't say anything, but I came over and sat on the edge of the table and watched them. Here you can see in this picture the narrator is watching, and Harris and George are doing the packing work. You see, he stepped. See, he stepped. George trod on the butter. George stepped on the butter. Here in the picture you can see it. Well, the narrator is watching them. It irritated them more than anything I could have said. It irritated them more than anything I could have said. It irritated them to see how Jerome was watching them, and they are committing mistake after mistake in the process of packing. I felt that he understands that they are irritated. It made them nervous and excited. And they stepped on things and put things behind them and then couldn't find them when they wanted them, and they packed the pies at the bottom and put heavy things on top and smashed the pies in. Pies means the stuffed edibles. They smashed. Such things they did while they were performing the act of packing. Well, that means the narrator finds a lot of mistakes with them. First, they found fault with the narrator's packing. Now, the narrator is finding fault with their packing. Then, the 10th paragraph, they upset salt over everything. And as for the butter, I never saw two men do more with 1 and 2 pence worth of butter in my whole life than they did. They made a mess with the butter. Okay, after George had got it off his slipper, we have seen George had stepped or trod on the butter and it stuck to his slipper. So they removed the butter from the slipper and they tried to put it in the kettle. It wouldn't go in. It wouldn't go in, and what was in wouldn't come out. That means it stuck. It stuck in the kettle. They did scrape it out at last and put it down on a chair. And Harris sat on it and it stuck to him, and they went looking for it all over the room. They removed the butter from the kettle, they scraped it, okay, and they put it on the chair, and Harris sat on the butter and the butter is stuck to his back. It stuck to his back. He was putting on a pant, and to his back side of the pant it is stuck, and they started searching where the butter has gone. Really a funny situation the author has created here. This is the element of humor, a very farcical humor that makes you laugh very loudly or very hilariously, you see. Then they are talking about the butter, they are asking each other about the butter. I will take my oath I put it down on that chair, said George, staring at the empty seat. I saw you do it myself not a minute ago, said Harris. Then they started round the room again looking for it, and then they met again in the center and stared at one another. They started moving around the room, they met at the center and looked in each other's eyes. Most extraordinary thing I have heard of, said George. That means they were wondering where the butter might have disappeared. Okay. Very so mysterious, said Harris. Then George got round at the back of Harris and saw it. George saw it. Why, here it is all the time, he exclaimed indignantly. Angrily, George exclaims, it is stuck to your back, the backside of your pant, he says. Where? Cried Harris, spinning around. He starts spinning, moving around. And stand still, George said. Don't spin around, stand still, can't you? Roared George, flying after him. And they got it off and packed it in the teapot. Finally, the butter was packed in the teapot. Well, then the next humorous thing, Montmorency, it is the name of a dog. Montmorency is the name of a dog. Montmorency was in it all, of course. While such things were happening, such strange things were happening during the process of packing, Montmorency, the dog, was watching. He was also there. Okay, what he does? Montmorency's ambition in life is to get in the way and be sworn at. That means he would get on the way, on your way, and you get angry and you just swear at him, you just curse him, okay, you call him names. Be sorry means here get scolded. You scold him, you call him names, isn't it? And that gives pleasure to Montmorency. Okay, he was very mischievous dog. If he can squirm means wriggle or twist in, wriggling in a and in a wriggling manner and twisting manner, you enter or come out of anything, that is called squirming. If he can squirm in anywhere where he particularly is not wanted, and be a perfect nuisance and make people mad, and make people mad, and 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 things thrown at his head, then he feels his day has not been wasted. That means he comes in between while you are pecking, okay, and you get irritated, and you hit him, you out of irritation, and then the dog becomes very happy. His purpose is solved because he wanted to irritate you. His purpose is solved. His purpose of irritating you is solved, and then he feels that his day has not been wasted. He has made his day. His purpose of irritating you is quite done, and it is he is successful in it. Okay, to get somebody to stumble over him and curse him steadily for an hour is his highest aim and object. See, while you are working, he will come on the way, and you will stumble over him, and you are about to fall, and it gives pleasure to the dog, the narrator says. And when he has succeeded in accomplishing this, his conceit becomes quite unbearable. Conceit means here self-pride. His self-pride becomes very unbearable. So much of self-pride the dog shows. Such a mischievous dog he is. In troubling the others, he gets pleasure. Then here what he does while the children are pecking, what he does, he came and sat on things just when they were wanted to be pecked, and he labored under the fixed belief that whenever Harris or George reached out their hand for anything, it was his cold damp nose that they wanted. That means he sat on the things, and when Harris and George were searching the things, their hand touched his nose, his cold damp nose, and it gave pleasure to the dog. He was of that mind that when they touch his nose while searching for the things, it would be a pleasure for him, the dog thought. Well, and he did it. Then he put his leg into the jam, he means the dog, and he worried the teaspoons, he disturbed the teaspoons, and he pretended that the lemons were rats, and got into the hamper and killed 3 of them before Harris could land him with the frying pan. He just broke the lemons. He thought that he assumed that the lemons were the rats, and he just squashed them, broke them, and Harris finally got very irritated, and he struck him with frying pan. Harris said, "I encouraged him." I didn't encourage him. A dog like that doesn't want any encouragement. It is a natural original sin that is born in him, that makes him do things like that. The dog is born with the sin of troubling or irritating others, the narrator Jerome says. And Harris suspected that this narrator might have encouraged him doing all such nuisance, but no, he says, I didn't do it. It was natural instinct of that dog. Well, the pecking was done at 12:50 in the night. Okay, then, and Harris sat on the big hamper and said he hoped nothing would be found broken. George said that if anything was broken, it was broken, which reflection seemed to comfort him. He also said he was ready for bed. Now it was almost midnight, and they were all getting ready to go to bed. We were all ready for bed. Harris was to sleep with us that night, and we went upstairs. Okay, they go upstairs for sleeping. Now, when the packing is done, we tossed for beds, and Harris had to sleep with me. He said, do you prefer the inside or the outside? J means Jerome. I said I generally preferred to sleep inside a bed, that is towards the side of the wall, not the opposite side. Harris said it was odd, very strange, very odd. George said, what time shall I wake you fellows in the morning? At what time should I wake you up? Harris said 7. I said no, 6, because I wanted to write some letters. Then there is again a quarrel between these boys at what time they should wake up. Okay, Harris and I had a bit of row over it. They were quarreling whether they should get up at 6 o'clock, or even before that or after that. Okay, 6 or 7 o'clock. Whether Harris said 7 and the narrator says 6. Harris and I had a bit of row over it, but at last split the difference. They made up their difference, okay, and said 6:30. That is, they agreed that at 6:30 George should wake them up. Wake us at 6:30, George, we said. They said. But again a funny thing, George made no answer, and we found on going over that he had been asleep for some time. He had already fallen asleep without receiving any answer from them. Okay, so we placed the bath where he could tumble into it on getting out in the morning. Again a very mischievous act the children do, a mischievous act. They put a bathtub where, and think that in the morning when he gets up he would stumble over it in the morning, and went to bed ourselves. And these two children go to bed, the narrator and Harris. And there this funny account ends, my dear boys and girls. This is by Jerome K Jerome, which is an extract or excerpt from Three Men in a Boat. It's a piece from this book, Three Men in a Boat. That's all for today. There are exercises on it, you do them. I'll be giving you some extra questions. That's all for today. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.